Oh, haha, look, that's the funny thing about going live. I was on mute all this time. So listen, we're back. Happy Friday, another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I'm your host, Nnamdi Osuagwu. Today, we are going into the topic of how data can make and break banks. I have an awesome guest, Matt Almeida, and we're going to get into it. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, Nnamdi. It's Friday. The sun's out in Portland, which isn't always guaranteed. So yeah, I'm loving life.
Speaking of weather, we have awesome weather here in the East Coast, in this New York, New Jersey area. I'm pretty excited about that. Guys, before we hop into it, have to jump into Matt's background. I'm gonna read his bio, and then we are going to jump into the show. Matt Almeida, VP of Engineering at Neocova, has spent the majority of his career navigating the intersection between modern data and distributed cloud architectures. Presently, his focus is on delivering a state-of-the-art data platform to small and mid-sized community banks to build new insights into their business and drive opportunities they can otherwise miss. That's why he's the perfect person to talk about how data can make or break banks. Listen, those familiar with the show, no, before we hop into the main topic, we just go over some news articles that we found interesting. We're going to get Matt's take on it, and then we're going to jump into the main topic. These articles usually segue into the main topic. So without further ado, let me jump into it. If you are out there, we are streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch. And those of you watching us on Instagram Live, we pinned the Tech Behind FinTech. Go to the website so you can comment. And also, we're not taking comments from Instagram, taking comments from Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch. So go there now. Let's jump into it. First article of the day. Finasteric collaborates with Microsoft to bring embedded financing options to thousands of businesses within banking as a service. So with this particular top article, they are integrating lending through Dynamics 365, which is a Microsoft product. So let's just read some of the stuff from the article. The banking as a service collaboration will look to leverage the data Dynamics 365 already holds to make it easier for thousands of small, medium enterprises, SMEs, to apply for funding. Let's get a quote from the CRO, Angus Ross. The capability will ease the process of accessing capital and power competitive financing offers in less time. I think that's pretty amazing, number one. The ability to provide banks with additional information, including accounts receivables and payable records, will improve lending decisions and time to cash for SMEs. Additionally, Finasteric's network of more than 5,000 U.S. financial institutions will allow SMEs to tap the most relevant and valuable financing options for their specific business needs. It's more of an embedded finance solution. Matt, what are your thoughts on that article?
I thought this is a really interesting example of how we're seeing banking as a service become a lot more common, at least in North America. And so the difference between being a bank and being a bank as a service is that technically banks will have a core system, which is essentially like the ledger. And there's a lot of maintenance and overhead to do this. You need to make sure you have enough capital. There's all these regulations and restrictions. So what a lot of banks have been doing is offering banking as a service, right? You can use our institution, our certificates, and our core, or pick a core and bring it in, and we'll manage all that for you. So this is really interesting because it talks about a way that a bank who might already be with Finastra can now extend their capabilities, right? There's more options to bring into play data. So I think this is just very telling about the industry at large, that banks are always looking to add another element of data, to add another element of service, to enhance what they have and what they can offer. And this sounds like a pretty sweet deal for anyone who's presently a Finastra customer. This is huge. And the fact they bring subject matter experts. Small, medium, undersized enterprises. I misinterpreted SME.
It's all good. Yeah, because I remember talking to a past client about that they were using Dynamics, but now within using that Dynamics 365, you can actually with this partnership look for financing within it, and then within Dynamics itself, you have your like the accounts payable, you have all that information to then background data for the loan. So definitely interested and interesting to see that and how technology is being leveraged, and great explanation on the banking as a service. Once again, if you have some comments and questions, shoot it in. Let's dive into the next article, which segues into our current topic. So Leah County State Bank modernizes technology infrastructure. So with this one, pull this up real quick. So yeah, this is a partnership with Jack Henry, a digital transformation. So New Mexico's Leah County State Bank has selected U.S.-based banking technology provider Jack Henry and Associates as it looks to upgrade its technology infrastructure. So Leah State Bank's, let's get a quote from the vice president: "Both our business and retail customers will have the same digital experience, removing friction, improving satisfaction, and ultimately helping us grow." What are some other comments from Jack Henry, Senior Vice President? "Community banking has changed. Today, a bank like Leah County State Bank can be as efficient and convenient as a non-traditional financial institutions." Some other stuff. "They have a branch anywhere product that will be a game changer for our bankers, allowing them to access key information about their accounts, hold face-to-face meetings with their customers, answer questions, and solve issues from anywhere outside the branch." I mean, look, that's what we're talking about right now, right? It's a whole idea of digital transformation, community banks and so forth embracing that. This particular bank with this digital technology provider. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
So this is interesting. This is real near and dear to my heart presently, because it's talking about small community banks and serving their problems. Jack Henry is a provider of a banking core. So they are one of the big players in the market, and they already have, 850 third-party fintechs on board with their service. So, I mean, I have to appreciate that, we have a small community bank getting their needs met, having access to far more advanced tooling than they would if they had to, find the budget themselves to hire out the team to do this. That said, Jack Henry is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They are a massive core provider. And, it's interesting seeing this dynamic as we see banks and the cores that serve them realize we need to break down barriers to data, bring more in-house and allow access and insights into that. There's almost two different approaches. The first is kind of a plucky upstart, right? How can we enhance this data? How can we bring more in and offer something to the bank? And do so from a small, lightweight, small company serving small company perspective. And then you have these mega companies like Jack Henry, who are, simultaneously a little bit of the problem. They're so large and stodgy and sometimes slow to adapt with larger contracts than small banks are useful for or capable of. And then you have these companies finally getting the memo. And on the other hand, they are now going around to all these fintechs and they're saying, hey, how can we improve our solution? Hey, is there another way that we can enhance the offerings that we provide? So I'm glad to see that we're seeing progress both in the grassroots small businesses solving these problems field, as well as the larger players also understanding that, we've got to improve this data, we've got to improve our offerings, and the small medium-sized community banks need this to survive.
I mean, great point. Sorry about that. I moved the wrong thing. All right, let's I think that's a perfect segue into our topic of how data can make or break banks. Before we jump into that, right, I want to talk about a couple of statistics, right? So first, right, we have two types of banks. We have community and we have mega banks. And in preparation for the show, certain things that I didn't understand, I didn't know, and maybe some of our audience might not either. But there are with community banks, There are 50,000 locations nationwide. Community banks constitute roughly 99% of all banks. You get that stat. It's either between 97 or 99% of all banks in the U.S. employ nearly 700,000 Americans and are the only physical bank presence in 1 in 3 U.S. counties. Didn't know that. Holding nearly 5.9 trillion in assets, over 4.9 trillion in deposits, and over 3.5 trillion in loans to consumers, small businesses, and the agricultural community. Community banks channel local deposits into main streets and neighborhoods they serve. So, when we talk about how data can make or break banks, right? When you talk about like the mega banks, from the JP Morgans to the Bank of Americas and so forth, right? They have, data scientists looking at even crypto technology. So really, really advanced stuff going on there. Scale that down to the community banks. And they seem to be the majority. I think in this conversation, we'll probably focus on that because, they're not as advanced as the mega bank, not as many resources and so forth. So, let's dive into that question, how data can make or break. Are they leveraging their data? Like what's going on right now in the industry? Kick it off, Matt.
Yeah, sure. So I think one difference between the two that I want to draw out is that if you're a mega bank, you can go out and hire hundreds of people far smarter than I to just throw together this amazing, just genius level, data model, or some sort of insight tooling that can delve into this. And so if it happens, it's in the data and they cannot see it and understand and react to it. The alternative is these small, medium community banks, they do not have the capabilities to hire staff like that. And banking, it costs money. To make money, I guess. But so these guys have to be, very deliberate, right? What tools am I going to bring in house, right? What offerings do I provide to my customers? And these are business decisions. I think what is it, the little tool Zelle that a lot of banks use now. I've heard, and this could just be ballpark, like activating that is about $1 per user.
Interesting.
Is that worth it?
I mean, but let's touch on something that you just said. So, from a resource issue, right? Mm-hmm. So just finding, look, in general, even there's a concept called the Great Resignation. There's a technology shortage in general when you start looking at data scientists. You start looking at people that know AI at that level. So that's one barrier right there. Even mega banks struggle with, even though they have the resources, just finding that type of talent. Now, and I want to drill in because that's an important thing that you mentioned. I just want to make sure we capture that. Now, when we go down on a way micro level, right, compared to the mega banks, it's nearly impossible to even not only find that talent, but do you even have the funding to keep that talent engaged, right? So I just want to take a pause there because I think that's something very important that you mentioned. Because we talk about technology all the time, but to implement the technology, you need a certain level of talent and resources there, and that's sometimes it's at a deficit, even for the mega banks, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, but now, cycling in, what are some of the things that is being missed by not like to that question, how can not leveraging the data break the bank? We're talking
sure.
on a community scale.
So I mentioned a tool like Zelle, right? You obviously want to provide enough offerings to your customers to keep them interested, to keep them happy. If I can go online and get a Capital One savings account with a far higher interest rate, that's likely to grab my attention. So a smaller bank has to make sure whatever they're offering really suits their customers' needs. Is it worth it to buy Zelle, right? Are my customers going to use this? Do I have the right user base to actually unlock, a positive impact on my business from this? Alternatively, right, you can be reactive to data. Oh, hey, this person has been transferring, $25K every 2 weeks out to Capital One savings account. Oh, shoot, we might be losing their business. It might be time to step in and chat with them. You're like, hey, Capital One offers this, savings account, but we actually have this, a CD that, you're not using this money. You're just letting it sit there. This has a better rate. So understanding where the money's going and trying to understand the why behind what your user base is doing, what they're interested in, and where they want to go. That's the piece that, small bank might not have access to those insights.
And I mean, great points that you're mentioning. I mean, with understanding outflows, right? Because in today's times, especially in the last 2 years, I mean, you have money going to crypto, like you have like it's going to Coinbase, right? And how are you capturing it? What might be hard for the audience, even me sometimes to understand is like, okay, because I'm in technology, obviously, so like these transactions are happening, and the question I would have is why aren't they seeing it? Like it's happening. Why aren't they making sense of it?
I mean, at the end of the day, data is hard. there's two elements to look at it. There is actually being able to dig in and understand and break apart data, which, as we spoke about, there's a high level of talent necessary to really unlock the full potential there. And so you may not have access to the employees who can really, break apart a data set and figure out what's going on there. The other side is that data gets messy. And, I touched on cores earlier, and this is a thing that we're seeing everywhere. You've got to have a core. But if you're a small or mid-sized bank and you can't afford, right, the premium core experience, you're not maybe going to have access to, an easy API to extract this data, or an easy way to keep all the different systems in sync.
Help the audience out. We have a question from the audience, but before we dive into the question from the comments, we'll post it. You mentioned core, and I think you touched on it before, but for the audience understanding, can you break down what exactly is a core?
A core, as I understand it, is essentially the mega ledger software behind what a bank does, right? When you have all of your users and their accounts and the transactions that occur, all of that is handled through a core, which is a generally big, bulky piece of very old software. You see some places like Jack Henry really starting to try to modernize. But if they modernize, they're going to modernize their premium products, not necessarily the basic offering that some of these smaller banks is all they can afford.
So from a smaller bank's perspective, do they outsource that core? Do they have that in-house? How does that process work?
So they'll enter into a service agreement with one of these providers to utilize that core. And then the question is, how do we take that core's data and extract it to a point where this bank can use it and find the right insights from that? And that's the tricky part.
No, this is great stuff. Thank you for that explanation. I'm going to jump into a audience question. LinkedIn user. I don't have access to my phone, so I can't see the name. But one of our viewers, I think Medina, always is this LinkedIn user. I think that's her. Comment if that's you. The question is, what are his thoughts on AML compliance for neo small banks, especially in the light of the USAA's downfalls, which isn't a neo bank?
So, yeah.
No, I mean,
AML is very interesting. AML, for anyone not familiar with that particular acronym, is anti-money laundering. I believe from the BSA AML, Bank Security Act, anti-money laundering thing. And there's a series of regulations that we expect our banks to comply to. That's basically like, oh, hey, this is an account known for terrorist activities. This user is sending money to this account consistently. That needs to be reported. There's many other, very nuanced rules around reporting, around, what might raise a red flag and cause, a report to get filed, a suspicious activity report, as they call it. So this is actually a very hard problem to solve because of the amount of data required. You have to have your data available and shared among other banks so that they can essentially look at all the transactions and see and trace certain, suspicious ones. You also have to really dig into the data to understand it, right? How are you going to know that this particular foreign account ID is known to terrorists? Now you have to keep track of this database that the government maintains and keep that in your data set to scan against and report. So AML is tricky, and I've seen everything from very automated solutions that handle a lot of this, automatically, to people running through basically with pen and paper suspicious looking transactions to draw up notes and then potentially send something off. So there's just a wide variety of how a bank can handle this. And like I said, a smaller bank who might be less equipped might have to go the more rote manual approach to doing this. So if they don't have access to the data that they need to gain these insights, and they may not have the resources or tooling necessary to handle this in a modern approach, they could be missing things. They could see many pieces of suspicious activity go unreported. And since they're on the hook for compliance with that, that can get them in a lot of hot water. So to bring it back around to the question, I guess, what are the thoughts? I think this is something that is mega important, but it requires such a high level of data insight that, we really need to look at a better way to allow banks to handle this than this heavy water, really high resource intensive strategy.
I mean, AML, just from past experiences, right? I mean, sometimes the first step is like being proactive. So you have like the know your KYC, know your customer and stuff like this. But to your point, right? You mentioned different ways, different codes that may be around. So it's like, how do you even enrich the data? So I'm assuming it's some way that you're now from a banking perspective using other services to make sense of certain codes, because obviously you don't have that all in house or with your core. So you have to go through some sort of data enrichment process. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. I think going back to, what is the bank's relationship with their core? If they have a more sophisticated core, they might have all of the elements and tools they need to handle this in-house, right? That could come out of the box and they don't have to think about it, which is great. But if their core provider doesn't handle that, who is going to do that? Who's going to solve that for them? So, I mean, I'd say they have to take a step back and realize that you have to know your data before you can do anything with the data. And a lot of people look for that silver bullet of like, oh, hey, give me an AML solution, when they don't necessarily have a full grasp on their data and can't take advantage of it.
That's a really good point. Listen, because I'm a student of the game, I have some slides, some modern data stack slides, and hopefully you could walk us through some of that. So let me add that back in. So I have this, saw some articles and some research, and I know you're an expert in these things. Let's dive into it. What is this stuff? What did we have? Things like ingestion, we have storage, we have query and process, we have transformation and output. Can you describe how a bank will put an architecture like this? And I have some other charts also. It's a good article I'll post it out that we came across. Can you go through this? Because before I'm sorry to add in, like, and to let everyone know, like, data comes in all sorts. We have files coming in, so it's not just, we could put everything in a database. It's just so many disparate pieces and trying to make sense of everything. So please help us out.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start going left to right here. So there's varying sources of data, right? We have the core element, which has all the ledger, what happened in the state bank, the activity, the users. But there's other elements in play here. For instance, you might get back a transaction code with a debit card point of sale. We don't know what that is. The bank doesn't know what that is, right? We'd actually have to call out to a totally different service to provide us answers about what happened with this transaction. Let's see, what else? They have call reports. That is a quarterly thing that's published to the government. And then sometimes, a bank needs to either check against that, sync against that, or eventually publish that, right? So again, this is not in the core. This is a separate piece of data that needs to be interacted with. So basically, to know what's happening, you need to get in touch with multiple sources across wherever. It could be your core, it could be a governmental website, it could be a third-party API. And if you really want to have a comprehensive data platform, you've got to figure out how to get in touch with all of these sources and bring them in-house and bring them somewhere. And so that'll lead us to the next couple steps here, ingestion and transport, right? Do I need to query an API for this data? Is this something that I can hook an ETL process up to a flat file download, right? Right? Data is nothing until you bring it in and you know what it is. You give it some form of structure that you can operate within. So obviously you take that to the next step, which is storage, right? How are you going to handle this? Traditional data approaches have been, data warehouse, which is a large structured organization of collections, or a data lake, which is just a grouping of flat files, a little bit unstructured. Now we're hearing that everyone wants the data lakehouse, which is a even more comprehensive platform, which not only has your data warehouse, but also is connected to your data lake. I think lake house just sells it. Everyone wants a lake house, so everyone's asking
Everyone
for
wants
it.
a lake house.
Yeah, I'll pause right here and see if you have any questions at all.
No, let's see. Let me see if there's some questions from the audience. This is some good stuff, man. This is really cool. We don't have any questions from the audience. No, I'm good. I love the walkthrough. I think it's awesome. Especially as you start going through the sources, the ingestion aspect, the storage aspect, and now I would assume you have to start making sense of the data and extracting it somehow, and that's what the querying and the processing side, please.
Yep. So stepping forward from storage, it's how are we going to extract this, right? How is this useful to us? And so you have to be able to query it. So that's why having, structures and strategies around your data lakehouse is important. So that's easily available. Transformation, right? You can get this data via some kind of query, but then what does it do? Do you need to, put it in some kind of reportable fashion? We see lots of different use cases for this data, anything from BI and generating reports to some kind of like automated action. Like maybe if a user opens up an account that has over $50,000 in it, we really like this person and we want to reach out to them and offer some other wealth management services. So maybe we want to kick that out immediately to Salesforce. Right. So you take the transformation, this data, package it in something that's useful, and then bring it to analysis and output. Right. Where are we interacting with this? What are we trying to do? Is this an automated process, or is this something that needs to be kind of reviewed, filtered, and potentially acted upon? The sky's the limit. Once you have your data in a very good form and is accessible, you can do a lot with it, and that's our goal here.
So let's question right there. Like I know from working in the financial industry for X amount of years, reporting is huge. I mean, but it's so, I don't want to use the word antiquated because it's still, I guess I just did, but because it's still in use. But that's always on people's minds. Like I need to get my report dashboard to be using it. But in this type of modern stack, besides the reporting, what are some other avenues that this can be leveraged?
Yeah, like I mentioned, anything that might kick off an automated action, like a Salesforce piece, right? Do we need to do something? Does someone need to be notified? Typically, from my experience, reporting is just like a top-down view over a period of time, but usually that's done in review. And I think that's one of the more interesting pieces is like, if you can get your data in order, it doesn't need to be a once a quarter review cycle. You can actively get insights as it's occurring and react. And I think if we're able to corral data and make it work for us in this fashion, we can flip the script on reporting and make that antiquated, right? Let's do it now. Let's learn about this and react and not have to worry about discussing last quarter because we handled it appropriately the whole time.
It's more iterative. It's happening in the moment. We're not like reviewing it from this report and doing it now. No, you're getting insights timely, actionable things are happening in other systems being kicked off behind the scenes. No, that's totally awesome. That's totally awesome. Is there anything else we want to dive into on this chart before we move on?
I think we were pretty comprehensive with it.
Let's see. I know I downloaded some other data. Let's see what we have here. So this is basically the definitions of it.
Actually, there was one point on that initial slide, and I did see user talked about disaster recovery and continuity of operations. And I feel like data governance kind of, it deals with that as well. So we might as well dive in while we're here.
Yeah, let's do it. I cracked the smirk because obviously I'm more in the cybersecurity side. So anytime I hear disaster recovery, I mean that's definitely up my alley. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot here. As we've had, side conversations, continuity of operations is a massive scope to look at. But let's think of, our standard disaster recoveries, right? An absolute loss of data, unable to access it, versus, data leaking out. So data governance, you've got to be security has to be paramount. You have to make sure that if I am taking everything that I have, everything that's valuable, relevant, and important to me, and I'm going to put it in one place, you got to make sure that that's triple locked down, right? Data governance is a massive, massive priority when it comes to understanding where your data is and what's going on with it and who handles it. So yeah, keeping security paramount is crucial as we kind of go through this process, because it's the entire riches of smog. I feel like, and you don't want anyone in there that can destroy companies, destroy banks. As far as kind of loss of access to data, ransomware, whatever. I mean, it's imperative that you keep backups of this, and you do so in a distributed fashion. So if you lose access to something that doesn't take out all your backups as well, you got to be eternally cognizant around data. It is my personal opinion, because it's kind of like the cash in your wallet. This is what has the potential to give you a really great day or unable to actually do anything with it. And so yeah, I saw that question. I saw data governance on the slide, and I thought we should probably dive into that just for a
No, I
second.
mean it's definitely important, and and when we start diving into putting the necessary controls around your data to adhere to your policies and so forth to protect it, it's a whole nother rabbit hole we can get into in terms of when you start talking about developer access to it, because people are building on top of this. So what type of controls do you have to encrypt your data while in development prior to production? So that's a whole other aspect that I think will fall under the governance side of things. No, that's cool. Let me go back to the. I have to switch screens a little bit because I'm seeing some questions pop up that let's pop up this next question. Can you discuss disaster recovery and continuity of operation, which includes ransomware events? What are the biggest gaps now in the field? Is that what you just?
Yeah, that's what we're
talked about?
discussing. Making
Okay.
sure you have appropriate failover that you have access to. If you use a third party of operations, do you know like what's going to happen if they go down? Do you know what data you have locked up with them, and can you get it restored to yourself if they have issues? So I think biggest gaps in the field relate to data governance, relate to knowing where you have what concern it is, and knowing how to handle that, especially in the worst case scenarios. Personally, those are what I've seen to be the biggest gaps, is just having a comprehensive knowledge of what is where, and being able to
And
respond.
it's so funny. As simple as it sounds, um, it, it it hasn't been executed fully in a lot of the cases where you see prior breaches, and this you could have some legacy system that no one's touching anymore, but it has valuable data in it. It hasn't been patched, hasn't been updated in a while, and that gets compromised. And there's an event, and you're like, wow, okay, we didn't even know that this thing's still plugged into this application. So no, that's very important. As you mentioned, also high resiliency. So are you backed up? So you everything got locked down. How can you restore your systems? So no, that's a great question. Great question. We have another question from the audience. Nathan Howard. I'm also curious where to start when tackling data analysis of a new ingestion pipeline. Before we answer that question, guys on Instagram, if you have questions and you want to get them posted, please go to the Tech Behind FinTech. You'll see links to our YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch, and you'll get your questions posted, and you'll also see our guests. On Instagram, you can only see me right now. All right, back. So can you answer? The question is from Nathan Howard. Thanks, by the way, everyone posting questions. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the interaction. I'm going to repeat. Nathan said, I'm also curious where to start when tackling data analysis of a new ingestion pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd start with the question is what are we trying to do here? Obviously, a new pipeline, you're going to want to look at your data forms, right? What am I extracting this from? What am I loading it into? And so you're probably going to have a little bit of control over, what structure shall I load it into? What am I going to do with this? So that's, like I said, taking a step back and saying, right, what insights am I looking to get out of this data? Do I have a very specific requirement of like, oh, hey, we're trying to learn about transaction codes here. And so you have a very like clear, okay, this is what the data is providing. Or is it kind of like, oh, hey, here's a rather large data set with some interesting pieces. We're going to have to dig that out and see what actually becomes valuable. And the latter is a more interesting exercise because you usually want someone who has experience with the data as well as basic domain knowledge of what we're doing here of banking. The intersectionality of that is kind of rare and hard to find. You can get someone incredibly clever with data who doesn't have any insights into the banking industry, and they won't know what's relevant. And they'll have to, partner up with someone who has zero insights into the data world, but know all about the banking industry. And those are where some of the most interesting conversations come from. Because when you start from scratch and don't make any assumptions about what's here, sometimes you stumble into, a new insight that neither of the two parties might have had at top of mind going in. But as they discussed what could happen there, you see something shape out that has more potential than what you might have already had in mind.
A follow-up, once again, Nathan, thank you. Great question. Follow-up questions, Nathan's question. So that's one aspect. So we get this lump sum big pile of data. We got to start an analysis on it. Do we think about what are we trying to solve first before even looking at the data? Like, what problem are you trying to solve? What are you trying to accomplish? And or do you come into it like, okay, I have this information. Let me now reverse engineer it to see what I can solve with that. Like, more of a philosophical question, but like, what? Just I kind of want to get your take on that.
I mean, I think that's more of an art than a science, frankly. It's going to have nuance to it. It's going to differ every time. Maybe the two parties, the domain subject matter expert and the data expert, varying people here might have different insights. It's one of the interesting things where, diverse backgrounds of people often come up with the most interesting, diverse things. So, you'll be asked to do both, right? Sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's an exploratory exercise. And when it is the latter, you just kind of gotta be curious and explore and see what you might find. Those can be a far more difficult exercise, that said, than saying, oh, hey, we need to get this specific set of requirements out of this data. So it's fun every now and then, but it can be mentally exhausting to really kind of apply that absolute curiosity to say, what do I have here and what can I do with it? But it's fun.
That's awesome stuff. I want to move on to this slide because obviously right now, every single application in the world has AI into it or advertise that AI or machine learning into it. Just want to get your thoughts on how that's introduced into this modern data stack, and is have you kind of walk us through this.
Yeah, well, just for reference, I'd say it's very rare to see this implemented in a data stack unless you have a very sophisticated platform already. But this is where a lot of the real interesting insights can be unlocked. What type of behavior makes a bank customer less or more likely to be leaving? Right? If we could find out when this customer is becoming dismayed with services and starting to act like someone who's about to peel off and close their account, is there something we can do to interact with them? These are things that maybe someone could go out in the field and interview 10,000 people who left a bank and say like, okay, what was your timeline? Imagine the amount of human hours necessary to like go through that and understand the problem well. But with machine learning, the beauty of it is that we can do all that automatically in the background. And so attrition, right? The loss of customers is something that, we've looked at my company. And so I'm using that as an example, right? It's something that you can build a model onto and then string your data across to essentially get some, I know, an added insight, an advanced insight, frankly. And that's really cool. That's something that banks could not have done before. Just impossible unless they had, the 10,000 interviews under belt and a comprehensive team to unlock that information. So I mean that's just one piece of what we can do here. Another item might be like finding what this customer's most likely best next product is. It's just like a recommender service on maybe your playlist, right? It's like, how do we know this user? How do we know this customer? What do they like? Is there anything that they would be served by that we're not providing them with? So I think there is massive opportunities in the banking industry to utilize this. But as I said, it's only really in place in the more sophisticated data platforms. So yeah, just taking us through, right? Data transformation. We'll have this data, ideally in a data platform, ideally in a structure that we know how to deal with it. And then we'll pipe that into our models. And so model training is an iterative cycle, right? You build a model, but you don't know everything about a subject right as you start learning, right as you start reading the book. So you constantly need to retrain this model to be better, to be more accurate. That's essentially what ML is doing is getting the computer to learn by like saying, okay, this is good, this is bad, let's do more of this. So once you have a model built, it's relatively accurate, right? Then you can build an inference. Then you can say, oh, hey, Jerry Long from Ohio is at a 75% rate likely of leaving the bank within 6 months. Someone should go talk to him. Oh, hey, Jimmy Schmidt, he has all these products, but he doesn't have a money market account. Why not? Does he know about this? This is free money for him, and it's stickiness to keep him as a customer, to keep him as a happy customer. So where you can take this has so many almost obvious applications, right? But it's just been so hard to draw out the insight of, oh, hey, what's this customer's next best thing? And to be able to do that at scale across the entire bank, across your entire data set, I mean, the possibilities are endless.
That's awesome. Great explanation. Love it. Let's see. Let me switch screens to see if it's some questions from the audience in regards to that. No, we don't have any current questions. Awesome insight. And what I want to do now is give you an opportunity. Obviously, you know so much about this, so I assume that you provide this service. So you could just tell us a little bit about like how community banks can leverage your firm, what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for a little shop called Neocova, and our goal is to provide a modern advanced data platform to small and mid-sized banking customers. Our goal is to make this kind of a lightweight, easy experience that will, open up and unlock their data in ways that they wouldn't have the resources to do so otherwise. So, like I said, everything we went across the data platform, the ML strategies, all of these elements are things that we see as available. We see like on the table, and no one's really kind of brought it to your small, mid-sized banks. That's where we're at. That's what we want to do. A bit of personal background. My grandpa was a farmer in middle of nowhere, rural Idaho, and my half uncle still runs a farm, and he regularly talks about the state of things. This isn't good. That's okay, we're going good this year. All of those things are incredibly nuanced, tiny pockets of relevancy, right? If the farm is having a real down year, right? If you go to US Bank, they're going to look at the stats. They're going to look at the numbers. They're going to say, yeah, this might not add up to get a loan, and it might be more difficult to do that. However, if there's a bank in your community and they're like, oh yeah, you're the Bramer farm. You guys own 14,000 acres and you're good for it, right? You've been a bastion of the community forever, right? That's the relationship that someone can have with a small bank that they wouldn't have with larger enterprise. So all of the things that we're seeing, right? instant account, really quick loan access that the larger banks are doing, right? That's ease. That's, you know, a great product. You know, that's a great offering, right? But the smaller banks can't do that. They don't have the resources. So what I'm hoping to do through my efforts at this company is really kind of give those smaller banks a fighting chance to continue to serve the community, to continue to be, you know, a stable piece of foundation for the community, so that they can still thrive.
That's absolutely awesome. Brief history lesson, right? Because you always try to prep for these shows. Uh, Banking began in 2000 BC with the first prototype banks, which were merchants of the world who gave grain loans to farmers and traders who carried goods between cities. So very interested you brought up the farming aspect, man. Listen, I thoroughly appreciate you coming on the show today. I learned a lot. I think it was an excellent conversation for our audience and our viewers. I definitely hope to have you on again to cover some other topics around data and diving into it. Last thing, anyone wants to find you, how would they do that?
Let's see. I'm on LinkedIn, and I basically deleted any other social, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm at Matt Almeida's Career, I think, is the URI for my profile, but hopefully I'm easy to find.
That's awesome. Listen, to everyone, once again, you can find us at the Tech Behind FinTech.com. If you're on Instagram, thank you for tuning in. Definitely appreciate you guys. Hit up the Tech Behind FinTech.com. Those of you who are live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and what did I miss? YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and of course LinkedIn. Thanks again. We're here every Friday, 12 p.m. I think it's ETD now, on our Eastern time. Have a phenomenal weekend. I'm your host, Nnamdi Osuagwu. Once again, techbehindfintech.com. You can visit us. Thanks again and cheers. We are out.
Thank you.